Good morning and welcome to this special meeting of the ISD 191 Burnsville Egan Savage School Board. The date is August 6, 2020, and the time is 8 a.m. I'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us this morning. We have some very important agenda items to discuss and receive information on, and we're really pleased to know that folks are with us. Director Courier, would you please lead us in the pledge? Or maybe Director Schatz, maybe you could lead us in the pledge this morning.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll start by approving this morning's agenda. I will take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Director Schatz. Second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Miller. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Kenny, will you please do the roll call vote?
Holwiger,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Schatz,
Aye.
Courier, Chester.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Thank you. Next, we will turn to the consent agenda. Although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussion on these items. In the event a board member wishes to discuss an item, that item will be moved for separate consideration. Do we have anything to move for separate consideration? Hearing none, I will take a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Director Schatz. Second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Miller. Ms. Kenny, would you please call the roll?
Alt,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Schatz,
Aye.
Courier, and Dee Dee, your mic is muted. Chester,
Aye.
Holwiger.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Thank you. Next, I would like to welcome Dr. Battle, Mina Oftedal, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, Stephanie White, Director of Student Support Services, and Lisa Ryder, Executive Director of Business Services. We will be learning more about the proposed 191 Fall Learning Plan. Welcome all.
Thank you, Chair Alt and directors of the board. Good morning, everyone. So this morning, my team and I will present the 3 base learning plans for the 2020-21 school year. The principles guiding our work, engagement to develop these tentative plans, and next steps. We all know the benefits of in-person instruction and social interaction that happens in schools. Although I think we responded well to a very difficult situation in the spring, we also know that distance learning was not perfect. I do have confidence in our amazing teachers and staff members to provide equitable instruction and learning opportunities and support services for students irrespective of the model. We have revamped our distance learning and now distance learning 2.0. And our summer programming show that these improvements can be successful. We are committed to providing specialized services as needed, has only increased in these plans as we will present tonight. As we consider the upcoming school year, I have heard from our constituents. There are concerns about the transition grades, kindergarten, 6th and 9th grade students, and staff new to a school due to boundary changes, and the class of 2021 is anxious about their senior year. Parents are worried about the health of their children and family members, managing the need to work and having children at home. Staff want to be with their students, yet are concerned about doing it safely. And employers want their employees to return to work safely. So we are all torn with the desire for an in-person learning plan and the need to keep everyone safe during this COVID-19 pandemic. So this is our dilemma. What has the more possible devastating and long-term impacts, COVID-19 or the non-in-person instructional impacts, such as learning loss, not adequately addressing mental health needs, the social emotional impact, lack of supervision for children when parents have to work, and others. If we were forced to decide today, data would indicate an in-person or hybrid environment for all students. That said, we are monitoring our data, which for the counties we serve, Dakota and Scott, have been increasing over the measured periods of time. So we must be ready to shift any of these learning models as data will shift. We are ready to fully implement Distance Learning 2.0 and provide flexibility for in-person instruction and support services for specialized groups, such as pre-K, delivery of learning assessments, speech and language services, and childcare for our critical workers. This morning, I will not declare a base learning model to open the 2021 school year. My leading recommendation to the board will be presented Thursday, August 13th. This recommendation will be driven by key questions. Can we safely return to in-person instruction considering many factors, including but not limited to Dakota and Scott counties COVID-19 cases in the last 14 days before the start of the school year, COVID-19 trend data, is it decreasing or is it increasing? What is our capacity and ability to implement the health protocols on buses, other transportation vehicles, and across school and district sites? What is the trend data that we're seeing about the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on Black, Indigenous, and people of color? Do we have the staffing to support each model? And also funding. So at this time, I'd like to start our presentation. And so we're going to start with slide 1 with Forward to the Fall. And I'll give a second as that slide presentation comes up. Thank you for your patience. So as we look forward to fall, there are about 34 days left until the start of the school year on September 8th for grades 1 through 12 and 36 days for kindergartners. Advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. We are planning for multiple scenarios, and I'm confident that our innovative school leaders and staff have created draft plans that have our students' best interests at the center and reflect our values as a community. We are also planning to continue our regular school district operations and functions. This includes supporting Board of Education work and providing essential human resource and finance functions. We will continue to provide school meals, and we will provide childcare for those critical workers that I mentioned previously. Next slide, please. I want to highlight the ways we have communicated and engaged our constituents. You see a list here of work that we've engaged in throughout the summer. In addition to this list, just on Tuesday, several principals met with building leadership team members. And yesterday, our district instructional leaders met to continue refining our planning. Also, staff has met with different constituent groups to provide input and feedback based on their specific area of responsibility. For example, members of our school improvement and student achievement team have met with their respective colleagues, such as the elementary teachers, throughout the summer to get their input. Next slide, please. So how have we approached and how have we been developing plans for delivering effective instruction and support services in response to the needs of COVID-19? We have created a guiding change document grounded in our values of expectations, respect, integrity, and partnership. You may be familiar with these documents, board members. We have used the guiding change document to guide our work for facilities realignment, as well as our boundary. There are three components to the guiding change document: current realities, unacceptable means, and desired results. I want to highlight a few bullets for each component, but at the foundation are what you see before you in this slide: healthy and safe students and staff, positive relationships, support, and personalized supports. So in our current reality, COVID-19 is a public health challenge. And we know district learning exacerbated the burden on children and families, disproportionately impacting communities of color. We currently have an established infrastructure and skilled staff to deliver distance learning, along with systems and resources to ensure access for all students. In the desired results section, we are giving priority to the health and safety of our staff, students, families, and communities. We are building relationships and getting to know students will be at the foundation of learning. We have a commitment, irrespective of the learning model, to increase the commit to giving students access to the support services they need. In the unacceptable means section, which is captured on the next slide, we must not create inequities, especially that create or exacerbate inequities for our Black, Indigenous, and people or communities of color. It is not acceptable to fail to use the equity lens of our culturally proficient school system framework to guide our work. It is not acceptable to not adhere to established policies, laws, executive orders, contracts, or not to follow the advice of the Minnesota Department of Health. It is not acceptable to make decisions in isolation without input. Next slide. So for our presentation, we will go through the Minnesota Department of Education scenarios that we've been planning for this summer, as well as we will cover Governor Walz's order and Minnesota's safe school plan. We're going to review health and safety, and the bulk of the presentation will be giving information about the instructional models, as well as our technology plan. We will also share the operations support, and then we'll go through next steps. Next slide, please. So on July 30th, Governor Walz, the Minnesota Department of Health and Minnesota Department of Education released Minnesota's Safe Learning Plan that outlined 5 steps for districts to determine a safe learning model and the 3 scenarios the district should plan for: in-person, distance learning, and a hybrid model. Next slide, please. In the Stay Safe Minnesota plan, the Safe Learning Plan, This slide shows the recommended learning model based on the number of cases per 10,000 residents over 14 days by county of resident. So there are steps that we must go through. So the next slide, please, shows the county residents. So there are steps that we have to go through. The first step, but it's not the only step, it's a beginning step, is to look at those cases within our respective counties. As of yesterday, or the last 14 days, I should say, Dakota County was at 19.8 per 100,000 residents, and Scott County was at 20.6. As I've said previously, both counties' trends are increasing. And so we must go through step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and step 5. And then if you see on the next slide, we have information on which one of the 3 scenarios is recommended based on your cases. So 0 to 9 is in person, 10 to 19 is in person, 0 to 9 is in person for all students. 10 to 19 is in person learning for elementary students, a hybrid for secondary students. Cases 20 to 29 are hybrid learning for all students. 30 to 49 is hybrid learning for elementary and distance learning for secondary. And if you have 50 plus, it's distance learning for all students. Please know that the governor expects all districts to offer a distance learning model, irrespective of your cases, for those families who need that flexibility. One more directive I'd like to share is that if you serve 2 counties, if a district serves 2 counties such as we do, we have to use the more conservative number. And so as we're looking at the cases over the 14 days, the Minnesota Department of Health, they will upload weekly so that we will have that information. Next slide, please. This slide demonstrates the framework that our school nurses use, the framework for 21st school nursing practices. It has students at the center. Bernie Bean is our lead licensed school nurse. She is a registered nurse with the Minnesota Board of Nursing, certified as a public health nurse. She is here tonight to answer specific questions you might have regarding health and safety, since I am not the health expert in the district. The nurses are the public health experts in our district. Bernie and our other school nurses will continue to collaborate with our local public health departments and the Minnesota Department of Health for ensuring the health and safety for students, family, and community. Next slide. We will implement the required health practices for all Minnesota schools, and you'll see in the next 2 slides, we've listed some of those: social distancing and minimizing exposure, face coverings, protecting vulnerable populations, hygiene practices, cleaning and materials handling. Next slide. Monitoring and excluding for illness, handling suspected or confirmed positive cases of COVID-19, water and ventilation systems, transportation, and support for mental health and wellness. So we will implement the required health practices for all Minnesota public schools because these practices are foundational to us minimizing the risk of exposure to COVID-19 for our students, staff, and families. Additionally, we do have a set of recommended practices within the Safe Minnesota plan. And so we will vet those recommended practices to see if they are applicable to our implementation of these learning models. And with that, I will turn it over to Amina Oftedal and Stephanie White for information about the 3 learning plans for District 191. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board, Dr. Battle, Chair Alt. This morning, just to let you know, as we move into our planning, some of the information that we used to build the plans included our family survey results, looking at how much our support we have out in our community for in-person learning, hybrid, and full distance learning. We also, next slide, we also wanted to respond to our staff survey and recognize some of the concerns that those folks have regarding return to school and address those in our instructional models. Next slide. So as we look at the three models, the in-person, the distance learning, and the hybrid, we know that distance learning 2.0, as Dr. Battle has referenced, really we have the opportunity to improve that delivery, and using the feedback from families, students, and staff from last spring's and the successes that we've seen in summer school, we really can look at distance learning in a way for us to deliver robust, full, comprehensive educational experience. In the distance learning model 2.0, we will be using these particular adaptations and improvements. We really are looking at incorporating additional required time for synchronous learning, scheduling specific office hours for teachers so that parents and students know exactly when they can reach them, really making sure that we are incorporating our benchmark assessments so that we can use that data to move forward, even though we may be using a distance learning platform, and really thinking about how we are focusing and streamlining our communications. We did purchase additional tools for online independent practice, ones that we had had kind of toyed with when they were free, and tried lots of different programs. This way we now have independent practice tools that students can use during their distance learning days that help us track their student progress, align with our standards, and allow us to differentiate where students start and what kind of interaction they need to have with those tools. We know that regardless of which model we go to as a whole district, the distance learning one will be available to all families. And so our distance learning 2.0 will be 100% available for families, and that we're going to call our virtual academy. And distance learning 2.0 will be the experience that students would have in a hybrid situation, so that in their in-person learning and they would experience distance learning. So the restructuring of distance learning 2.0 was very focused and responsive to our own learning and the needs of our students, our staff, and our families. Slide. As we were working on the constraints for our hybrid model and thinking about planning that, we recognized that we have three main points of information that have to balance. That includes what our student to staff ratio would be, the number of staff that we have available, and the numbers of spaces that we have available. And that we have flexibility in all three of those points in the triangle. However, there is that spot, that circle that creates that barrier, that we can stretch our triangle in many different directions, but the farthest we can stretch it is to the edge of the circle, because that is our maximum capacity. So using those three things, we examined multiple scenarios. We probably looked at the data for over a dozen different scenarios, trying to find the ones that had the feasibility. When we brought those back, really looked at what would be required operationally to make these feasible, we really did land on a couple of scenarios that we feel like would not only meet our students' instructional needs and our priorities, but also would be feasible within the constraints that are available to us. Next slide. So when we looked at what we needed to have in consideration in our priorities for hybrid learning, we would have students spending part of their week in person with a licensed teacher, and part of their day or part of their week doing distance learning for the full day with a licensed teacher. Now, there's many different models, but we wanted to see if we could get as much as many students as possible for as much time as possible. We also wanted to prioritize our youngest learners. And so when we looked at the model, we really wanted to look at how do we maximize our staff and our space and our ratios to get as many of our primary age students doing as much face-to-face as possible. We also looked at how to organize our instructional model to be sure that we are following and enhancing all of the health and safety protocols that that are required for students in person. We wanted to create an organization that would reduce and mitigate exposure, and consulting with the with our school nurses in order to make sure that we were putting into place practices that would reduce that and mitigate that exposure for students and for staff. We also wanted to make sure that in the hybrid model, we were looking specifically at a strict adherence to our 6-foot social distancing at all times. And that plays into our space constraints as well. We wanted to utilize as much of our building spaces as possible and find every option within those buildings. We also wanted to make sure that we, as we designed our curriculum and our delivery models, that we were isolating those things that are better served face-to-face, and those activities and strategies that really we've been successful with through the online. We really wanted to ensure that in every model, students had an opportunity for at least one day of distance learning, because we believe we will need to pivot back and forth. And in order to do that, we wanted to build the independence and capacity of students and families to manage their own online activities. And having the students have that practice day during the week allows us to do direct teaching of those technology skills and practice those with students, and use immediate feedback to during the week to see how successful they could be. If we would have to move to an all distance learning format, every student then would have some increased independence and capacity to manage their own online learning. Slide, please. When we think about those priorities and those considerations, the hybrid model that we feel will meet the most of and be one of the best solutions is looking at our pre-K through 2nd grade learners and have them come in-person learning for 4 days a week. Now, we would also be looking at reducing the size of the pods. So a class of students may be divided into smaller pods to reduce the and mitigate the exposure, and would have a licensed staff member with them in that pod for the entire in-person time. That would, and because of the 6-foot social distancing, those pod sizes would be significantly smaller than our current class sizes, asking us to draw upon as much FTE that we have in those buildings. We think that by giving our students, our primary students, that extra piece, we can better assess where our students are currently beginning their school year and adapt our curriculum and our focus to make sure that we are meeting students exactly where they are and moving them forward, and examining any learning loss that may have occurred. Grades 3 through 5, we would look at having them come in person for 2 days a week with 3 days of distance learning. And grades 6 through 12 would be 2 days a week with 3 days of distance learning. In those, for our students 3 through 12, we would be looking at taking the entire grade level and bringing in half of that grade level as a cohort, and then dividing them into smaller pods throughout the building with a teacher. So half of the students would come Monday, Tuesday, and the other half of the students would come in person on Thursday, Friday. We would have Wednesday throughout the district as a day that would be distance learning for all students. It would also provide us with the availability of spaces in the building to extend in-person learning to students who may need that additional support. And that could be, special opportunities for advanced learners. It could also be focused instruction in math for students who may need that. It could be that students who were absent on any of the in-person days with their cohort could come that day and receive significant support to catch them up with their peers. So that Wednesday would be a day of a lot of flexibility and being able to utilize our building spaces for students' more personalized and individualized needs. Even if we were in the hybrid, the full distance learning option for students and families would still be available, and that students could still opt to be part of the virtual academy, which would be our 100% online. Slide, please. The in-person learning, if we have the opportunity to move to in-person learning for all, it does mean that all students would come every day in person. But to be very clear, it would not be coming back with business as usual. The students would be coming back, but we would have the enhanced safety protocols still in place. We would continue to follow all of those guidelines. The only piece that we would adjust is that would be the social distancing in the classrooms. We would do as much social distancing whenever possible in the classrooms, but we would not adhere to the strict 6 foot while students are in the classroom. In all of the hybrid and the in-person learning, we also would no longer do congregate activities where we would bring all students in a grade level or all students in the school together. For example, we would limit the pods that would be out on the playground at a time. We would limit how many students would be in the cafeteria at any one time, those types of things. And in all of those situations, we would maintain the 6 foot social distance. So regardless of which model that we start the school year in, we would be able to pivot from one to the other. The structures in our high school would, the schedule, all of those pieces would be designed to move swiftly from one to the other so that we could, for example, move from full distance learning for all students to a hybrid model to an all in person, and that we would have those consistent threads that go all the way through. In all of those situations, we would continue to offer the option for 100% virtual academy learning for families who would choose that. And the survey that we have from parents from this summer indicates there are many families who would like to take advantage of that option.
Thank you, Amina. We're going to move to the next slide and have Stephanie White present. And then after Stephanie finishes, I skipped 2 slides, the family survey results and the staff survey results. And so we'll go back to those 2 slides, and then I'll turn it over to Chair Alt before we go to operations. Stephanie?
Good morning, Superintendent Battle. Good morning, Chair Alt and school board members. This morning, I'd like to talk to you about some of the planning that we're doing around the supports for our families and students. The first really is a item that addresses the communication that we are going to create for families to be able to access the information and the questions that they have. And so we're creating clear pathways for families to get support and persons both in these summer days that we have left, but also as we move forward. Each building, as you know, has a wonderful student support team led by that principal, and the members are social workers, cultural liaisons, school psychologists, counselors, and of course our licensed school nurses. And so really cleaning up our communication for each particular building, as well as the summer, to help families easily access the information that they need. We wanted to point out the amazing community partners that we have, and we continue to grow. Within our district, Tom Umhofer, our community ed director, does some amazing leadership around food for our community and families. One is called Pantry 191, and the other is the Brain Power in a Backpack. And so we're pleased to say that those continue and have served so many students and families. Our community partners continue with the YMCA, and in particular, the YMCA of downtown Minneapolis and the Equity Center. We have amazing home childcare centers here. Open Door Pantry has served many students and families. Headway continues to be a strong partner for us, and we have a renewed partnership there. And they are beginning to take on new referrals to help us meet those mental health needs of our students and families. They have the capacity now to do telemedicine or teletherapy. And so no matter what model we have, they'll be able to flex with us in order to meet those needs. Saroon is a new partner that we started forming last year. They made some great connections for us, and we did some poignant trainings around trauma and the effects of the situation, both the racial violence that our communities have experienced, as well as COVID and the trauma that surrounds that. And so they have done a great job of providing training for all of our staff, and we will continue that throughout the school year as well. We have Children's Dental, and they are going to start actually next week. They use our Diamond Head Clinic. Because all services paused, we're happy to know that those things are starting to pick up again in those medical fields. And so we're happy that they're coming in and taking appointments for dental services. Dakota and Scott County have been an amazing partner for us throughout this, and I'll let Bernie talk more about that. And then of course, Park Nicollet. And Park Nicollet has 3 wonderful braids that come into our district and supports, of course, that Diamond Head Clinic, and they will be focusing on immunizations. Another service that has been paused, and we are targeting that need for our students and families and making sure they know where the immunizations can be received, and helping families make those connections. And Diamond Head Clinic is such a strong partner for us. Growing with Grief is for students who have a loss, and they've served 60 students last year, and then they provide teletherapy as well. And this is all supported by the Foundation for Park Nicollet, and is free for our families. Information for all families, the broadband internet. I think I should let Rachel jump in on that one. Is she here this morning?
I think she may have technical difficulties.
She's
but-
on mute.
Oh,
I got it. Sorry about that. Good morning. This last spring, as we moved to distance learning in our emergency method, we really realized the needs for a broadband internet service for our students in their homes. Many students who did not have internet service lost the ability to go to friends' homes, to coffee shops, to stay in our schools, to go to libraries, and so forth. So we've done a significant amount of work over both the spring and the summer to ensure that we have a layered approach to both information for our families around broadband service in their home, as well as providing additional district support when it is needed in the form of a partnership with Comcast Internet Essentials, as well as some hotspots that will be available. And one of the things as we move, when Amina was talking about the move to synchronous learning, we really are looking at those higher internet needs. So when we start to talk about internet, that broadband kind of term is really starting to distinguish the ability to really be able to stream like in a video conferencing manner. The other thing that we're looking for supports for families and students is continuing to improve our technology support. We know that there is varied comfort with technology and how to access both by students and families from home. And so we want to make sure that we have a system in place this fall where technology does not become a barrier for any of our students.
Thank you. I think next slide.
we're going to go back to our family and staff survey results. So thank you, Amina Oftedal, who is our Director of School Improvement and Student Achievement, Stephanie White, Director of Support Services, and Rachel Gorton, who is our Director of Technology. So earlier I mentioned the input and feedback engagement with our constituents. So we have surveyed our families. We wanted to highlight just this one question as it relates to our learning models. To what extent do you support or oppose the following models? And the greatest support, strong plus paired with somewhat, was for a hybrid model, with 62% of parents showing at least some support for that model. We received 2,481 responses. The next slide represents our staff survey results. One question we would like to highlight is, how comfortable are you returning to your school or workplace on a normal schedule? We received 488 responses. You will see that 30.3% were very uncomfortable, 34% somewhat uncomfortable, 22.3% somewhat comfortable, and 13.3% with being very comfortable. And so with that, Chair Alt, I'll turn it over to you. We'll take a pause for questions and answers before we move on to operations. Chair Alt.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. Yes, board members, based on the information that we have received thus far, does anyone have any questions or comments that they would like to make to presenters? Director Schatz.
Yeah, thank you for the report. I know a ton of work has gone into this, and I'd be surprised if only 12 models and examples were actually created. So I'm sure it's many, many more than that. I want to go back to the one of the first slides. It's the learning models one, based on the number of cases in the county. Sorry, I forgot which slide it was. Just to make sure that I understand, and also our public understands what this is, and just make sure if I have the correct understanding. So what this, this is the recommended scenarios for these cases, right? This is not, you must, if we have between 10 and 19 cases, this is what we must do. This is what MDE recommends to do, right? So I want to, would that be accurate, Teresa?
Director Schatz, members of the board, this is required. We can go more restrictive, but we can't go less.
Okay, so that was part two of this, but so that 10 to 19, that's the maximum that we can do, is for 10 to 19 cases. The maximum that we can do is in-person learning for elementary students and hybrid learning for secondary students, right? That's the maximum that we'd be able to do. We can't go in-person learning for all students at that level, right? That's how we read that chart. Okay. And this is okay. So that's that. I think that's kind of the piece that wasn't clear to me at first reading of this chart, and I want to make sure that it's clear to everyone that's viewing this, that section of 10 to 19, that's the maximum that we're able to do. We can do anything more restrictive than that, as you point out. So I just want to make sure people have that it's this. We don't, just because we have 10 to 19, that doesn't mean that is the thing that we have to do. That's the maximum that we can do. So that's the only comment I had about this report, about this presentation. I just want to make sure that was clear to everyone. So thank you.
I like to ask Bernie Bean if she wanted to add any clarification before I move on, because this is part of her conversation with the county health departments.
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you for having me with you today. That's the base number, but it's also, there's lots of discussions that happen. Public health is in worked with the nurses continually to look at what the specific demographics are in our community, what is the case mix in our community, where are maybe some of those cases coming from, and then we get guidance also from MDH. So it's a continual looping back and forth with the regional team that helps determine with administration what is really the best and the safest model for our district at this time. So this is kind of just the beginning template, these numbers, these ranges, but there's more that goes into interpreting those numbers, and that comes from from public health and from the Minnesota Department of Health.
Dr. Schultz, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, actually, yeah, thank you. There's certainly a lot more that goes into it. I had actually received quite a few questions from different people saying, oh, all we have to do is look at this chart and say how many cases do we have in Dakota County, and then that's the thing that we do. And so I just wanted to make sure that people were clear that, as you said, this is the first step, but also this, whatever our case number is, that's the maximum we can do. We can do things that are less restrictive as well. So that's why I bring it up, because I received some questions about that from members of the public about, this is not the straightforward thing that we must do. This is the maximum that we're able to do.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's just that. That's all.
Dr. Miller, I think you had your hand up next.
Thank you, Gerald. Yeah, I'll just piggyback. I wanted to come back to this chart. I know this is out there in the community, and everybody's looking at this. And so just because I have paid a lot of attention to this and read a lot about the analysis of what the governor was talking about when this was released. So just to be clear that everybody understands, again, this is a starting point. It's the beginning of the conversation. It's the guidance meant to start where you start with and then go forward from there. So as we were just discussing, there's a lot of other elements that will go into this decision. Capacity of buildings, individual breakout, or places where there might be more. One building might, for instance, have a breakout of the COVID virus, and we might need to go a certain building into a distance learning for a period of time, etc. So this model simply is a starting point, and it was mentioned in the presentation. I'll just repeat, because we do span 2 counties. Governor's guidance is, and these guidance is that we take the more restrictive of the 2 options. So if you were listening closely in the presentation earlier, you would have heard that Scott actually County falls in the 10 to 19 range, and Dakota currently falls in the 20 to 29, just for reference point. So of course, we'll have a decision in a few weeks on exactly where we're going to land, but just so people understand how to use this chart. I want to thank everybody that, as Darcy said, that put the time into this. I mean, and that's an understatement. I know you guys have been working all summer on this, and it's been fantastic to see where we're headed, and we have a framework in place. And I know for those listening out there, and we have quite a few watching today, I understand that you probably came to this hoping you'd have a definitive answer on where we're going to be with school starting in the fall. But we have some time still and this thing is a dynamic changing environment. So please be patient with us. But what I'm comfortable here as a board member hearing is that we're ready for the scenarios that we need to execute going forward. I do also want to comment on the survey results. If we could just look to that slide for a second. And what was actually very impressive to me was the response rate, both with the staff and the teachers in the community. 2,481. I would harbor to guess that that's pretty high. One of the higher responses we've ever had for a survey in this community. So I really, really appreciate that. Thank you for the community. We're incorporating this into our decision-making matrix, and I really, really do appreciate that, especially, and also the staff. Dr. Battle, there are a few things that weren't touched on in here, and I don't know if you're ready to talk about them yet, but one would be transportation and some of the challenges that go into that. we bus a considerable amount of our students around, and a bus is a very tight captured environment. What we've done, think about that a little bit. And then could you just speak in general terms how this modeling has any impact or reflection, or is it a completely separate decision-making chain for any kind of extracurricular activities, or even activities that occur within the school day that might not be a kind of a classic in classroom time? So band, for instance, or choir or whatever. So can you speak a little bit to those 2 points?
Yes, Director Miller, members of the board. After this Q&A on the instructional models, we will move to operations. And so I will ask Executive Director Lisa Ryder and Dave Lake, after Lisa presents the operations, if they can specifically answer transportation questions. Regarding extracurricular, that includes activities as well as athletics, sports. Assistant Superintendent Gersich will be able to provide additional information about that when we move to that next section.
Okay, thank you.
Director Tester.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. My question is under each model, I mean, outside of the 100% in person, but with distance learning, the virtual academy and the hybrid model, being able to, I'd like some more information about how students with special ed needs or IEPs are going to be supported, or what the flexibility will be for them in these models, just to make sure that they're getting the support that they need, and understanding the uniqueness of each student needing those services. And then in addition to that, even under the hybrid model or the 100% distance learning model, what does childcare look like? It says that we're going to be providing childcare for the critical essential workers. I would like an understanding of what that definition is, because I'm thinking of families who need to work where both parents still have to work outside of the home because it's required for the income for them to pay their rent or pay their house payment or be able to pay their bills or have food on the table, but not be able to necessarily be there to support their child for their distance learning, or be able to afford to pay for childcare in that instance. And so wondering what are the options for families under those 2 models who would really need that childcare.
Thank you, Director Chester, members of the board. One note, as we will possibly have to transition among the plans, in the governor's executive order and guidance, we do have 5 days of planning to implement if we're going to a different model. So I wanted to note that. Regarding your questions about special education needs, I'd like Director Stephanie White to answer. And then regarding the child care, Lisa Ryder and Tom Umhofer can answer. And we also have Stacy Kanopa, who's our supports the Project Kids, coordinator for Project Kids. So I'll turn it over to Stephanie White.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the special education services in all 3 models. What we know about the special education planning and IEPs is that we will stick with having each student follow the annual IEP due process. So we'll have our annual IEPs as normal. Write those IEPs with rigorous targeted goals and objectives that are identified and that are aligned with those needs that we've identified through the evaluation. We will also have a flexible learning plan that aligns with the annual IEP that will flex with us throughout, no matter what process there is. So it won't require IEP teams to continue to meet every time a plan is changed. And those will be done in the fall or at the annual IEP meeting time. SPED form been wonderful in aligning and helping us create these documents to I guess to write out exactly what we'll be doing, so IEP teams, parents know exactly what happens no matter what model we're in. The other things that I want to highlight is we're spending some time calling our families who are in a smaller self-contained classroom. We have about 150 families, and so our supervisors are in the process now of reaching out to each and every family. It's giving us amazing information and feedback about what the particular needs are of our students in those smaller classrooms. We're talking about transportation with them. What's the safest way we can get kiddos to school? We're also talking about PPE. How is it going for them and in their family, and starting to pave the way for the supports that we would give that student in order to move forward. We also have purchased online interventions that can help teachers and students and families access those general ed curriculum. So sometimes, of course, our first attempt or our first option for success for kids is to have them access those general ed classrooms. But sometimes that's not possible for a variety of reasons. And so we want to make sure that if it's not possible for a student to access a general ed class, we have access to those general ed curriculums. It's different from what Amina is talking about in terms of practice items. We'll access those tools as well, but we're really looking into and have purchased some curriculums, and it's for all students, no matter where they're coming to us in their learning journey. We're going to be using some virtual conferencing and interventions. That was something we didn't do in the spring because we didn't have informed parents. We didn't have informed staff about what that meant. So we're going to do some parent education. We're going to do some parent permissions so that everybody knows. But that will allow students to meet in small groups and be face-to-face in that synchronous model. And we're excited about that. We think it's going to be great. And we got some good feedback this summer on how that's going for special ed students and students who are receiving intervention. Our OTs, PTs, and speech will have teletherapy still available to them. And that might even be if a student is in person in school, depending on the exposure of that student and staff. And so we'll work with those individual teams to make those good health and safety decisions. So sometimes it might be in person, sometimes it might be telehealth, and sometimes it might be when they are on their distance learning days. So the IEP team around each particular student will have a voice in that and helping us to plan those that fit each student the best. In our secondary schools, the Schoology platform that we use allows us to create folders for
Stephanie, I think you can still hear us, but you're frozen. So we'll work on that and she'll finish. Are you there? Okay.
Yep. So we believe that all of that will help many students. I think that's all. I guess just overall, we will continue to strive to we will continue to strive as any year in implementing those IEPs to the fullest extent. We're going to go after those learning gaps. We're going to go after that targeted intervention services that we do like any other year. And we're excited about the flexibility that a Wednesday would bring us. We're excited about the capacity to individualize throughout this flexible model. I think it's going to be really an innovative time for our special education teams to really think about the personalized learning that kids need to do.
Thank you very much. Board members, any other questions before I ask my final questions on this section?
We had that second question from Director Chester regarding the child care.
Oh, child care, yes.
Yeah.
We're doing that now. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. And so I'll turn it over to Lisa, Ryder, and Tom Umhoff.
Thank you. So Tom can join in as well. I guess With regard to your child care question, Director Chester, the idea is that our Tier 1 employees, as has been indicated again in the executive order, childcare throughout the day for them would be available for free during that daytime period. Before and after school, we'll continue to have a fee for families, although we are looking to partner with our county partners in potentially arriving at a sliding fee, with some of that being supplemented potentially by some funds that may be received through the county. So that's in process of discussion at this point in time. So we are hoping for some alternative options for families that that maybe can't afford that full cost of childcare. And so that's an option. As we talk about Wednesdays, I know that that Tom and his team are working very hard on determining what that might look like for options for families as well, given that that would be kind of a district-wide day in which a lot of students may need some additional attention to with regard to childcare. So all of this is really dependent upon the learning model that is determined at the given time and what a site may be at as well. So we want to make sure we have something that's flexible and easily available for our families based upon their needs.
Could you define what Tier 1 means?
I don't have it in front of me, but it is essentially the critical employees that, similar to previous, they've just expanded that to include a few more groups than what was originally the case last spring. And so it gets very specific, and I can certainly share that out to you. I just don't have it in front of me at the moment.
Educators and school staff and child care and school age care providers would also be included in that now. It's very clearly spelled out this time around, in addition to the emergency workers, police, fire, all that. So they more clearly defined it this time around.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Chair Alt.
Thank you. Board members, any board member who hasn't yet asked a question or made a comment who would like to do so? All right. I guess my question, trying to be a little more explicit, Stephanie, you touched on it. Wednesdays really are being designed both to allow staff to get weekly professional development and continue to hone their craft, and also give flexibility for our families and students. So, you know, I know GT was mentioned, math learners, someone who might have been absent. That also would include, you know, students with other unique needs like special ed and English learners that we might be able to flex them into learning on that day, depending on the model that's chosen. Is that correct?
Yes, we need to engage in our professional development for teachers in a different way than we did last spring. So I'd like Amina Oftedal to explain the difference between that emergency distant learning that we implemented versus what's going to happen in 2.0. And then also she can share some more information about providing that more personalized support for students. Amina?
Thank you, Dr. Battle. When we think about the Wednesdays this spring, we really did set them aside as independent practice for students, and did tremendous amounts of professional development. We really want to look at this Wednesday in this model for the hybrid to be a learning day for students. And so students will still expect to participate in the synchronous learning that day, and have some independent practice assigned to them as well. It doesn't mean that they'll see all of their teachers that day necessarily, but they will engage in synchronous learning for a variety of different content areas during that time. We really wanted to make sure that we did not lose any instructional time and kept it as consistent as possible for families. That will allow some time within the day for some collaborative team meetings and for some professional development, but it won't be as concentrated as it was this spring, because some teachers will also be engaged in delivering instruction and support to small groups during that time. One of the things that we look at too might be a specific group of students who with special needs of some sort who really struggle with that independent practice and management of their learning when online may be asked to come into the building and have supervised online time. So they're still interacting with the teacher, with their peers for that synchronous learning, but there is an adult who can help supervise and engage, keep them connected, make sure that they are able to follow along with directions that are given, just that additional support, even though they are participating in distance learning. And so that's one model that could occur. It could also be a time to do assessments. So at the high school, we may have students who need to come in to do some demonstrations or live hands-on assessments to earn their certificates or to demonstrate different types of project learning. And so that could be an opportunity for students to come in and do those things as well. It could be an opportunity for a flexible group of students who may need to come together to engage in a specific project, a project learning piece in which they need assistance. There just needs to be great care taken that we aren't that we're still mitigating exposure for students when they come in for that Wednesday. And so there'll be some pretty strict guidelines for that, restrictions on the protective wear, whether it's masks, shields, and masks and shields, or other types of those types of things. But it really does offer us that opportunity for a team of teachers to say, you know what, this would be a great opportunity, for example, my newcomers who have very little academic English at this time, to bring them in for a day to engage in other types of learning that they wouldn't have been able to do with their peers in the classroom. And so while we're delivering services for special ed and EL and intervention in lots of different ways, there are some instances where we want to reserve the right to invite students to come for that additional dose, whether it's for a GT project or whether it's for assistance with their distance learning, or whether it's for a very focused assessment or learning opportunity that can only be done in person.
Thank you. I'll just put a little bookmark because that gets me thinking about transportation, and I know that's coming next. And then also just in terms of Rachel, your comment about, making sure that technology does not become a barrier in all of this. And correct me if I'm mistaken, but I seem to remember seeing statistics that we were able to successfully connect 100% of families in their home environment, but we still struggled with families who were more mobile. Is that true? How are we looking at addressing that moving forward if hotspots aren't going to do it?
Yeah, one of the interesting things about internet access is that it is fluid for many families. And so it's a continuous, I feel like we're continually wrapping our families with supports for internet. We also did not require any synchronous learning in the spring, and synchronous learning requires more internet data be available. And so we continuously are working with cultural liaisons, our social workers, our counselors, our principals, and individual teachers who know their students really well and know family situations and can work to provide it. In some situations, it's just information about where to access community resources. And in other situations, it is much more about district supported internet. And we have made some adjustments so that the unlimited hotspots, that we're not going to run into data issues for our synchronous learning, because the feedback has been very, very strong that the synchronous part of learning this summer has been one of the big advantages that students and families have seen. So we want to make sure that that we're supporting that. And as far as the technology with barriers, I feel I hope that we're not really talking about technology very much, but that's just an assumed that we've got that it is there, and so we can really talk about how we're supporting our students' academic and social emotional needs.
let it just be that platform that exists that we don't need to talk about. Yeah, that's great.
Exactly.
Thank you. That's those are my questions. Dr. Battle, I guess we just thank Stephanie White and Amina and Rachel for all being here and all of their hard work. We really, really appreciate everything that you're doing.
Thank you. So we're going to go to the operations slide. We'll have Executive Director Lisa Ryder present. And please, when you get to the transportation, please, if you and Director Dave Lake, who's our Director of Operations, can spend some adding more detail to answer Vice Chair Miller's questions and possible questions that Chair Alt might have. Lisa?
Absolutely. Good morning, Chair Alt, Directors of the Board, Superintendent Battle. For the operations, every year we are partners with our families. However, this year there's an even greater need for all of us to partner together and support one another. Food and nutrition will have access to school meals through our National School and Breakfast Lunch Program, our National Breakfast and Lunch Food Program. And there is a potential that other state or federal actions may make other options available, but at this point in time, we are planning to be utilizing the National School Lunch Program that also offers breakfast. As we talk about transportation, there is, in the guide from Minnesota Department of Education Planning Guide, they talk about the fact that there is at most 50% capacity on our transportation vehicles. So we have identified what that looks like for every single size bus that we have available for our transportation needs. With that in mind, and knowing that we do not have access to additional buses, we therefore are asking that families who are eligible for bus transportation and are able bring their children to school using means other than the school bus transportation and indicate this commitment by opting out of school district provided school bus transportation as we begin this next year. Once we understand which families that would be comfortable for them to do, that will also be combined with the information of which learning group a student is assigned to based on the learning model we are implementing across the district. And so all of that will be used for our transportation routers who are just awaiting this information so they can get going on determining exactly which students are on which buses. I'm going to pause here for a moment and let Dave Lake speak to transportation as well, and particularly in answering any of the other questions we may have had earlier.
Good morning. So as Lisa alluded to already, we're currently working with CISO to set up our routing schedules for all three models. We've been in regular communication and meetings with Schmidt & Sons as well as CISO to offer them guidance, answer their questions. We will have seating charts as our expectation for all buses. As Lisa was speaking to this earlier, a 77 passenger bus has 26 seats. Normally you'll have 3 per seat. What we're going to do this, the way we're setting it up now, we're going to have 25 of those 26 seats available, allowing space between the driver and that first seat will be off limits. So we'll have 25 on a 77 passenger bus, with the exception that we can add, if we have family members traveling together, they can sit on the same seat. So we will be able to exceed that a little bit as family members travel together. For a type A bus or our SPED buses, we're allowing 5 on that bus. Again, for that type, there's 6 seats. We're keeping the seat right behind the driver open. So that puts us down to 5 seats and 5 passengers. Seating charts will be expected on all buses. Like I said, 1 student per seat rather than 3, which has been past practice. PPE will be provided on all buses. Every driver will wear a mask. All students will be asked and required to wear masks. Hand sanitizer and disposable masks will also be available on all buses. And we are adding age-appropriate signage to the school buses as well, as a reminder and a friendly cue before they get onto the bus. as to our expectations. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
So thank you, Director. I like Bernie Bean, while she's still available, if she can talk about the mask requirement, because there are some exceptions. And so we can talk about how we're going to address that if a parent believes that there's a reason for a child not to wear the mask. And then Assistant Superintendent Gershis can talk about utilizing our PBIS for those cases to make sure that we don't make assumptions and have children stigmatized or bullied. So I'll turn it over to Bernie for that, Chair Alt, please, before she needs to possibly go to another meeting.
Thank you. I just also want to review that health and safety wraps around every operation within the school day for the children and the community. All procedures, plans, health and safety is a foundational component that we need to have in place. So all these activities we have been looking at as nurses, just to be sure that we are layering mitigation strategies as guided by MDH. As far as masks, the executive order does say that children 5 and up to adults need to be wearing a mask in a public setting. However, we know some children that is a learning curve for them, and we would be working with those children and those families. We want to create the safest environment for the children and for the staff. And I kind of related to wearing glasses for the first time. When you're not used to that, there's some conditioning that needs to happen, and we're going to work with families. And for children that need to see a mouth for their learning needs, we're going to work with that also. We have some alternatives for them. So it will be individualized, student specific, meeting the needs that that student or staff have, but also creating the safest and the healthiest environment we can in the school system.
Thank you. Chair Alt, would you like to have the transportation questions asked now, or would you like Lisa to continue?
I thought you had said there was going to be a conversation about PBIS before transportation.
Oh,
do you
yes. Assistant Superintendent Gersich, did you want to weigh in on that, please?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, Superintendent Battle, and Board of Directors. I know I'll be in here with a couple of different talking points. When it comes down to, I think one of the common questions people have had as we've started discussing mask mandates is how do you force kids to wear masks, or what do we do if students aren't wearing masks? And while I'm not here to say I'm providing you, here's exactly what's going to happen, what the solution is, I want to make sure that people understand that we have systems within our school sites that really lend well to having these conversations. And again, I had this conversation yesterday with principals. As we talk about masks, how are we going to utilize PBIS? The wearing of a mask is inherently a behavior that we're asking students to engage in. So how can we use those familiar languages to teach students these behaviors and use those as our systems to help provide guidance when students are struggling with the ability to do that? Similar, as Dr. Battle had said, there may be situations where students, because of their conditions or otherwise, are unable to wear a mask. How do we ensure that we utilize those same kind of systems to prevent things like bullying or harassment based on the unique nature of what those students are going through? So you can expect some more specifics of those things to be evolving as we move forward, but it would also be something we'd be working with our principals on, and further they'd be working with their PBIS teams on as to how are we going to teach, because that's certainly going to look different in a kindergarten setting than it is going to in a senior high school elective course.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open it up for, let's see, Director Miller, you had a question earlier about transportation.
Actually, I think it was answered. My most important question was that we're addressing it and that it brought up in this conversation. I do want to, I guess, more of a comment. I am glad we got into a little bit of the weeds on the size of the buses and the seats and such. And I think what it illuminates is the challenges that we're going to have in just this element of our obligation to our students. I'm going to be frank. I'm a little concerned that that we have a reliance on parents opting out. So, of course, it is our responsibility as board members to come at everything with a critical eye and have a little bit of that skepticism. So, I trust you guys will manage that. I am a little concerned that because if we don't meet some sort of threshold, then we're going to have some sort of transportation bottleneck problem or issues. So just stating that, and then on the I'll just take a moment then and skip to the PPE for a minute too. I've done a lot of thinking about this because generally the conversations in our communities and nationally is simply whether the kids are going back or not. And I think what today has illuminated that there's a lot more to this conversation than just that simple answer. And given everything else, if you just set that aside for a minute, the simple ask that we're having for our students to wear masks all day, we've already addressed that a bit here, but I can't imagine the obligation we're putting on our teachers and our staff to work with our kids and get that enforced. So I appreciate the work that's going into it. I think addressing it from the PBIS perspective is an excellent way of taking on to it. And I think, Brian, you made a great point that, it's just a further in enhancing behavior. We have many behaviors we expect of our students in the school throughout the day before COVID came along, and this will just be an additional one. A comment to our community that's listening in, we're parents, we all are, and it's inherent on us to model this at home and, to, as it would be with anything else, reminding kids that use their pleases and thank yous, reminding them to respect their elders, respect their teachers, all the other things that we do as parents when we're bringing up our kids. Regardless of your personal perspective on mask wearing, the kids are going to need to wear them to be in the classroom. They're going to need to wear them to themselves be in the classroom and to make it capable for us to have all the other kids that are going to be in the classroom. So I just ask our community to remember that primarily our first and foremost, our role is to model good behavior to our students, our kids, and help them, understand that, it's important they wear them. So that's all I have, Cheryl.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Dr. Chester, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. My follow-up questions regarding both transportation and PPE, again, goes along with special needs or special education. And agreeing with what Director Miller was sharing, I'm also concerned or wanting to know more about the requirements of PPE where there is special needs at play. A child who may have cognitive challenges in understanding the requirement of PPE or have extreme sensory issues where it would be hard for a child to keep that on or have that in place. And then with transportation, we got information regarding traditional busing, but with special ed busing, those buses are smaller. And then also for students who are busing from out of the district in to what would be considered or available for them in this scenario.
Thank you, Director Chester. Lisa Ryder has not gone into the specifics of the PPE, but I'd like to ask Bernie Bean and Stephanie White to comment on your specific questions because they do need to log off at 9:30. There actually is a statewide call support from, I believe, MDE and MDH on PPE for our special education students and staff. So I'm going to turn it over really quickly to Bernie and Stephanie, and any additional questions, we'll make sure we get it to them after this meeting. So Stephanie and Bernie.
Thank you, Superintendent Battle. And thank you for the opportunity of this question. The guidance specifically tells us to work with that IEP team when there are specific needs around PPE. And that makes a lot of sense to me and to the team, and that each child's needs around that will be very unique. And we want to make sure that families and students know that and staff that we're going to be working with the entire team to figure out what option is available and still keeps people safe. And I'll let Bernie talk more about this, but she's taught us about layering on those mitigations. And so if something happens where we need to get closer to a student in order to serve them, so we're closer than 6 feet, what is it that we can do to mitigate that exposure for that amount of time? And so those are the kind of guidelines or thinking, problem solving that we're doing around that, just to kind of come at it in a different way than just the basic mask, shield, and 6 feet of social distancing. And as Superintendent Battle said, we have a call today at 9:30 to discuss that specific situation. When services are required to break 6 feet, what are the kinds of mitigations that we should be preparing for in order to keep our students and staff safe, and to make sure that the accommodations we're doing fit the needs of that particular student.
Yeah, it's a partnership, especially with families for children that do have those special needs. It's a partnership. And we need to figure out the safest and the best approach for what that child can wear and do, and how we can keep layering on mitigation strategies to make the environment safe. If a child cannot physically remove a mask, they will not be wearing a mask according to the guidance. But we will still be working with children. It's a continual door revolving, and we have seen that with COVID as we learn more science. All these public health principles are based on the science of what we know. Yes, there's a lot that we don't know, but the charge for the licensed school nurses in our health service team is to take that science, take those principles, and make the environment as safe as possible by layering multiple mitigation strategies. The nurses will be reaching out to the families that they know children may be falling in those categories, and start that planning during the month of August, because we want to be ready and we want families to know we are there behind them, supporting the health and safety of their child. Just like Chair Miller said, I would also encourage families to start working with their children now to wear a mask. No different than you get them ready for school. That should be a part of getting them ready for school. There's lots of great videos out there to introduce wearing a mask to children, getting them versed in doing that. There's things that we can be doing now. And will a kindergartner, preschooler be able to wear it the whole day? No, that's a conditioning thing, and we will work with those children. But I think the main thing to emphasize is we are going to work case by case. We are going to layer mitigation strategies. Right now, the nurses are working with the building principals because every building is different. And they have the education piece, and we have health and safety. And as we work together, or what I call waltzing together, we are going to create a fabulous environment for learning that is safe and healthy for our children. It will change as we learn more, but that's our strive and that's our challenge, and we're ready for that.
Thank you very much. That was very, very nicely put. Board members, I know Stephanie and Bernie, you both have to leave. Board members, are there any other questions specifically for Stephanie or Bernie before they have to go? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you, and please keep everybody posted. So I think, let's see, where are we? We're with operations. So now we're talking transportation. Director Miller had his question. I guess I just have my little bookmark from previously was a question about how Wednesdays might work. I mean, I understand that those are different, but in terms of transportation, that seems like a very fluid day.
It will be fluid. We also know that this will probably require quite a bit of additional time and attention by our transportation routers this year. As, for example, Wednesdays we may utilize for purposes of being able to deliver meals to families that need meals, and they'd get a full week's worth of meals potentially delivered to their home if they are unable due to transportation or other means to obtain those meals. And students are eligible. The other option might be potential kits or other materials, educational materials that need to be delivered. Additionally, as has been mentioned, there may be some students who may be routed in for various different means and necessities. So that would be something that would be communicated and kind of treated more like kind of a, here's a field trip we need a route for this kind of thing. So we anticipate that to be a very fluid day and something that is going to take a little bit of coordination as we move into this, particularly if students change from, if our learning model changes for a particular site or something of that nature. So we'll just need to really be in collaboration as we move through this next year. And I know our partners at Schmidt & Sons and at CISO are ready and waiting to do whatever they can to support our families. It's a matter of us just really learning the exact learning model we're going to start with and making sure that we get all of the measures in place for that.
Great. So we'll return to the slide deck and let you continue with the plan presentation.
Okay. So next is our custodial cleaning, and we will continue as per the MDE guidelines for cleaning of our spaces, and a lot of that will depend upon the instructional model used at any particular site as well as the use of our space. You've heard some discussion of potential use of space that is not typically a classroom, and so all of that will require some thought and attention from each of our building custodians, and they will continue to use their known methods for cleaning that meet the guidelines. As we look at the personal protective equipment, or what we call PPE, this has been ordered or received via the county and state distribution processes. If we don't have all of that, it was most recently distributed by the state, that's soon coming. And we feel that with all of that in play, we are prepared for the start of the school. As we get started, the question will be how quickly will we run through our supply and need to replenish, and that will largely depend on the learning model that is in place across our district. So it's a matter of being very flexible and knowing exactly where our sources can be, as we may need to order more down the road, but we know for at least the first couple of months we're ready to roll. With regard to childcare before and after school, we touched a little bit about this earlier. It has been provided throughout the spring and the summer, and I have to say we've learned so much from the work that has been done by that team. And I think that they have been extraordinary in their measures, and we will continue to learn from their experience, as well as they will continue to provide that excellent care that is provided for both Tier 1 families that would be through the day if need be, as well as our families that have always needed childcare before or after school. With whatever learning model we are in at the time, that need may change for families too. And so we want to be able to try and provide enough flexibility to be able to serve our families, and we'll do the best that we can with everything related to that. I do know that because it's so related to the learning model, that at this point in time, more details will be coming forward in the future related to childcare. But we do want families to be assured that if they have a need for childcare, then we will have something for them to be able to consider and see if that best meets their needs. I would at this moment then pause and see if there's anything that any of either Tom or Dave may feel that they need to correct if I've misstated anything, but otherwise, that's the conclusion of the operations in partnership with families.
Just to clarify on one aspect,
Childcare
there was,
standpoint, I know my staff met again yesterday to go over plans again, depending on what we end up with and how the district moves forward. We will have something in place. They've recreated the registration materials, looking at a more comprehensive way to engage more of our community members this time around. If Stacy wants to add anything, but that's really all I have. We're ready to go for you.
Dave, did you have anything else to add?
yeah, there was an earlier question about disruption to special education busing. We're not anticipating that there will be any issue there. Normally the maximum capacity is 12, although we're expecting 5. A normal route on a normal year, we're looking at anywhere from about 6 to 8. We have plenty of type A buses available, so we're not expecting any sort of disruption there. So I think we'll be fortunate in that area.
Thank you all.
Do we want to go to the next slide?
Yes. And so Chair Alt and board members, this is our last slide. So next steps, I first want to thank the board for your questions, your support during this time. I think your questions today illuminated the complexity of the decision to determine the learning plan for reopening of school. I also want to thank you and our parents and students for your grace and flexibility throughout the spring, and also giving us some grace, some time to actually give a close read to the governor's new executive order and the guidance from Minnesota Department of Health, as well as Minnesota Department of Education. It took time for us to read through all the documents. I think within the Minnesota Safe Plan, there's probably 12 subset plans that staff members had to dive in really quickly and read based on their area of responsibility. And then after reading, then we had to really use our critical thinking skills to understand it, come together, to have the common understanding, and then also to apply it to adjusting the plans that we have been working on all summer. So I cannot thank you enough for giving us patience over the last few days to do that work. So next steps, there may be a possible school calendar adjustment. We did receive from Minnesota State High School League the athletics and activities. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian Gersich, who's going to give you more information about those first two.
Thank you, Superintendent Battle. As it relates to potential calendar adjustments, one of the common questions that has come to me, either directly through staff or through some of our leaders, is if there's some consideration looking at our fall calendar from a couple of different aspects. Certainly, what we're talking about, a lot of this is health and safety, which is our primary, but it's also making sure that we're prepared to provide that high quality, world-class education that we're expecting in our community, and making sure that we have the preparation to do that. So there is some consideration is the response to that, about that calendar, to make sure that we have the right amount of professional development, talking about some things like how are we going to make sure that our parents are oriented to this new learning environment as parent roles, as well as some potential opportunities for assessments. And so we may be coming back to take a look at what is typically the first day of students the day after Labor Day and the week before with just our instructional staff to go through and prepare. That may look different, and we may be proposing that looks different to ensure that we are properly prepared. We're not unique. There are a number of districts that have already declared they may push back another week for those instructional days to provide that, as well as Dr. Battle and I are both aware of professional organizations that are trying to do this as a collaborative effort with the state to say, is this important for us to be able to do? So we will continue to watch that. The other aspect of school calendar that we're also looking at discussing is related more individually at our site level with bell schedules, arrivals and departures, are certainly an important part of what we're doing, as we want to make sure that we do this in a detailed way that's safe. But also we've got to make sure that we are carving out within our school day the appropriate amount of time for planning and collaboration in doing education in a very different way. And I think we all saw a lot of great work by our educators, but we got to make sure that we're very deliberate and purposeful about how we're carving out that time as a part of the day and making sure that those opportunities are there. As it relates to athletics and activities, 2 days ago, the State High School League did put out their ruling, and certainly we as partners and members of the State High School League have an understanding of what it looks like for athletics. Certainly on a individualized level, I don't have all of the parameters, but the big picture is that both volleyball and football, as fall sports traditionally, have pushed into a winter/spring season, so kind of a season that's going to happen later. Other sports and activities will happen, but with changes and adjustments, fewer contests, no scrimmages, etc. So they are taking some additional precautions and steps in place to run some of those other fall athletics. I'm certainly confident that our participants in those, our student athletes, are keenly aware of how that relates to them, and that our coaches are reaching out and already helping make sure that we're implementing some of those things. Director Miller had asked earlier too about the activities. Appreciate the work of Jay Lepper. He's a high school assistant principal, as well as our activities director. As soon as the high school league had made their ruling, he was right on top of saying, so what should we be looking at for activities? Activities are case by case and are site level determined. So we don't have the same governing body like we do have with the State High School League. So I don't have a determination on each one of those. What I have to present to you though is that we do have a process. And in discussing that with Jay, the first layer of that is Jay looking at those activities and ensuring, are these activities that we do believe can be made safe with modifications, precautions, or otherwise? And if the answer to that is yes, then similar, and thanks to Tom Umhofer and our community ed programs that went through a lot of these processes with our summer activities, they would need to be developing, in collaboration with our school nurses, plans for how they would run those activities and adhere to all of these safety precautions. And at that point, be making the determination of, can we provide those activities? As an educator, and as all of us, as you've said before, as parents, we want to see as many educational opportunities as possible. We're going to work hard to provide those, but to make sure that we are taking health and safety of our students and our advisors and our entire populations as a part of those determinations.
Thank you, Mr. Gersich. And so the next steps to continue with the additional next steps, I will present my leading recommendation at the August 13th Board of Education meeting. We will continue to monitor the COVID-19 cases for both counties. And at the August 27th board meeting, I'll provide an update. Between today and the 27th, I'd like Aaron Tinklenberg to share about the ongoing engagement with students, listening to family, and also involving staff in the planning. So Brian may need to come back in with Amina with staff involved in the planning. So Aaron.
Thank you, Superintendent Battle and Chair Alta, members of the board. We went over at the beginning some of the engagement that we did with staff and parents and students earlier this year, kind of leading into all of this planning. We have had ongoing communications going out to families in particular, as well as staff, to let them know the timeline and some of the particulars. We'll have another communication going out today. In all of those, we're trying to provide ways for families to send us their questions, send us their responses. So while we may not have a formal engagement, another survey, for instance, before the start of the school year, we are listening to what questions, what concerns parents have on an ongoing basis. And then we are also working with the student board rep right now. She and I have been connected and working on a plan to set up a couple of sort of informal conversations between Superintendent Battle and groups of students. We held these conversations with parents a week or so ago, and they were really helpful, illuminating. Got good feedback from the parents as well, and I'm hopeful that that'll be the case with students. In fact, I'm sure it will be, because they always have good insights for us. So that's where we are in terms of continuing to engage students and families. And if Brian would like to talk about staff engagement as well, let him do that.
Actually, if Amina Oftedals, I'll give her an opportunity to maybe comment first on some of that, and then just kind of fill in if Amina's still with us.
Sure. We're talking about calendar adjustments. And
No, the staff. Oh, go ahead,
staffing,
Amina.
yes.
Staff, yeah, involving the
Sorry.
planning moving forward. I know
Right.
we're juggling many balls.
We're going back and forth. Right. Staff involved with planning. We have been engaging our steering committees in our elementary to prepare distance learning lessons. We have the first 4 weeks of those lessons completed so that teachers can come back and draw upon those immediately. We have tried to meet with some of our instructional groups of our specialists, such as art, music, FIED, and digital learning specialists, to plan what that might look like for them as well, both as a hybrid and as distance learning. We continue to work with our departments, with our secondary curriculum coordinator to really determine how they're going to organize themselves and deliver the curriculum in a collaborative way. And so we are working with our teacher leaders and really helping them be part of how we're preparing to move forward with many of these different models.
Thank you. Brian, did you have anything else to add?
No, as Amina described, it's an ongoing process with both our building leadership teams at each of those site levels, as well as just, again, continued openness to conversations and meetings. And I know we'll be in contact again. We have met with, and we'll plan to continue to meet with representatives also from RBEA.
Thank you. So board members, I want you to know that as we move forward, our plan will be based on the safety of our staff and students, and our goal will be to provide families choice and consistency. Lastly, I say to our parents, because the plans may change, we have to be able to shift as the data may shift. I suggest that parents have backup plans for childcare. Earlier, we listed some of the resources that we have with partnerships, Dakota and Scott County, our mental health providers. And so we do want to support you in those backup plans if we change models. Also, we ask you to think about plans if your family is personally impacted by a confirmed case of coronavirus. Our school nurses are a support, and so we wanted to make sure that you know we will support you in your plans as we move forward to fall. We are in this together, and for us to return safely to school and work, we must follow the health protocols to be healthy and safe. We will continue to work and receive guidance from our board members. And once again, the amazing staff that has really put all their expertise and talents, first in the spring with the emergency implementation of distance learning, and now with this time that we've had to plan for the fall. With that, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you. I will open it up for a last round of questions, and I see Director Chester's hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. My question is with the different models, outside of 100% in school learning, at the end of the school year, I think it was at the end of the school year, this last spring, kids were provided with the school supply list for going into the fall. And because it can be a financial burden on families having to prepare for school supplies based off of what we are knowing or planning now, will there be a modified list that goes out, or what would be the plan regarding school supplies for families?
Thank you, Director Chester, and members of the board. So as you know, in the spring emergency implementation of our response to COVID, there were so many community members, staff members willing to help. And so there are some school supply drives that have already been initiated. And so I'll let Brian, Amina, or Tom to kind of talk about, first Brian about the school supply list, or Amina, and then Tom about, we actually had two staff members assigned to help coordinate all volunteer offers. One staff member in Amina Oftedal's office, and then one from Tom Umhofer's office in community education. So Brian.
Yep, I'll just give the honest response, which is I don't have an answer as far as what that school supply list looks like. But what I can do is put that onto a list and make sure that that's something that's addressed and provide those that feedback in the near future.
It's interesting, in the parent Zoom conference, one parent talked about just pulling the list from last year. So I know parents are trying to get ahead of this. So we'll get that out to our parents as soon as we can.
Yeah, my thought was, is if we're in distance learning mode, are actually all the supplies going to be needed if you're not in the classroom or in a hybrid setting? So like what, are all the supplies, will the list need to be modified to adopt to the education model that will be used?
All right, Director Miller, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I would just like to, again, thank everybody that came prepared today and the
Eric, you're breaking out. You might need to start again.
Are you able to hear me?
Now we can, yes. Maybe we go to Director Schatz next and maybe give your Wi-Fi a few minutes to refresh itself.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions, I think. One about
yeah, again, just thank you to everyone. The hours I know they've gone in.
I think Director Miller is finished.
Okay.
Director Schatz, go ahead.
Okay, I have two questions. One is about, Lisa, you referred to the cleaning protocols that we have for, our custodians, those which are, of course, what we have great standards in place for those. Are there additional requirements, cleaning protocols, things like that, that MDE is asking us to add to our process?
I think what it is about the high touch spots need to be paid attention to throughout the day. So depending upon the full use of a building, that may differ between buildings as to exactly where and what those are. Additionally, with the Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday will probably provide quite a bit more time for some of the other areas to be more fully cleaned midweek between student groups. And so that's a positive too, we view with that learning model. And in addition, then after Friday, then we have the weekend and evening hours to continue to clean every night as they have been. Our methods are well in place, given the fact that we have the hydrostatic cleaners. And in addition, we do have plenty of sanitizing solutions. It's I think a matter of, there's not the try and find some Lysol wipes at the store anymore, right? So it's some of those things are instead maybe not as available as what some people would like to see. So instead we have other methods. We have spray bottle along with paper towels to make sure that that is available for people to do a quick clean, to just clean something before you sanitize it. So that's also available too for people.
Okay, thank you. My other question is about, I see some schools, we have, certainly protocols in place for if students become sick or staff becomes sick, things like that. And I see, we've got those protocols in place. And so how are we, I guess, our students and staff self-monitoring for their own symptoms or how they're feeling before they come to school? I'm not sure whose question that is, but
Director Schatz and member of the board, I will defer that question to Bernie Bean and Stephanie White, because that is quite a complex response that we need to give you. So we'll make sure we get that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Director Miller, I see your hand is still up.
Yeah, all right, you able to hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
So first, I just wanted to thank everybody again for presenting today and the work that went into getting here. I really do appreciate that. And I know the primary focus of this conversation and the district is educating our kiddos. But I do want to be very clear that for our staff, our teachers, our administrators, all of them out there, I want you to know that we take it very serious. So we are very aware of the challenges and the concerns you have as we go back to the school year this year. And it's foremost, I know, in a lot of these conversations we're having behind the scenes, making sure you guys have what you need and you're safe, you're comfortable, you can get back to doing what the career you chose. So please know we respect very much that, especially the teachers who are going to be out there on the front line every day. We have a deep respect for what we're asking you when you get back in the classroom, and we anticipate your safety being one of our primary concerns, or if not our primary concern. So, thank you.
Any other questions from board members before I wrap us up? No. Okay, I had a couple of comments. First, in terms of the serving meals and snacks, am I correct in understanding that we'll be serving those at our 2 middle schools and at the high school? That's the plan?
So we have done very well in utilizing our Eagle Ridge and Nicollet locations for the manufacturing of meals as needed throughout the summer months. And we want to take advantage of what we've learned and continue that process from those sites, as that allows us to produce quite the number of meals that may be necessary depending upon which learning model we're in. So we know that throughout all the operations areas, everyone's trying to find what's that ribbon of available services that we can provide throughout whatever learning model there is. And if they can adhere to that ribbon as much as possible and then tweak it as need be, depending upon the learning model, that's what we're shooting for. So yes, we are going to rely heavily on our middle schools and the high school. And then depending upon what is necessary at the elementary schools, we'll adjust.
Because I guess my comment for you and your team to consider is that we're very central and west centric with this plan as it's spelled out and outlined today. And we have quite a few families on the east side, and looking at, areas where there's a higher concentration of families, I would be really concerned if we don't have some meals served in a school cafeteria on the east side, if that's the means by which we must serve our meals. Understanding that, of course, we all are well aware that food service was able to get incredibly creative in the spring and in the summer. And we know we would love to be able to continue that, but if we're not, the east side needs to have some representation in the cafeteria.
I understand your concern, and I think that is a matter of the adhering to the National School Lunch Program, which then makes it so it's required by the eligibility of the students. and which spaces we can use is dependent upon whether they are area eligible, but we will work hard to find that location that's on the east side to make sure we're serving.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I know this is probably getting a little bit in the weeds, but I just wanted to call it out. I know that we've talked about, getting feedback from families in summer school that, the individual packets that the elementary students received were so very helpful. And I'm sure that you're already talking about this, but we went in one of the recent rounds of budget cuts. Of course, we know that access to printers was greatly reduced. And I just want to call that out and make sure that we're not burdening staff with coming up with their own materials if this is really the means by which we believe will best serve our families. I don't know how you're going to solve it, but if it's just something that we need to consider, that we know we don't have the same, staff doesn't have the same access to printers as they did in the past. And then just a wondering in terms of, Aaron, you had talked about getting feedback from families. I know in previous efforts, we have had an online form for families to share their thoughts. I don't know what kind of form might be created with maybe buckets, for topics for families to share their thoughts in. Just wanted to float that out there as a possibility. Knowing that, of course, the in-person conversation, the virtual conversations are enriching too.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good idea. I think it's something we'll monitor and certainly consider. Even just having a simple provide your feedback form right on the webpage around fall 2020 planning is certainly possible.
And I know we haven't talked about it, but there will be a Q&A document coming up so that families can learn from each other's questions.
Yep, and that's actually available online, and just like we do with other frequently asked questions, we'll add to it as we get more questions and as we have more answers.
Awesome. And I guess just a general comment. Well, yeah, one more thing, just from a board perspective. I think the answer is kind of obvious, but I wanted to check in with fellow board members in terms of our meeting model and a potential change depending on the learning plan that Dr. Battle and her team identify. So for instance, if Dr. Battle chooses and her team decide that a hybrid plan is best, what does that mean for how we meet? And I'll open, Director Miller, is your hand up? Or still just not put down?
It was up from before, but I'll go ahead and take an opportunity to comment. Well, personally, I'd be okay. We have a fairly large meeting facility coming in and meeting as long as I think we did this a couple of times near the beginning of the quarantine period where we could meet spread out throughout the room. I think it'd behoove us to probably do that do a hybrid model combination where we essentially are doing this, but we're there in person. So, use the cameras and the facilities that we have there to broadcast our meetings live for the public and meet, but probably restrict attendance only to ourselves and presenters. That'd be my opinion, but I also would err on the side of caution given whatever everybody feels comfortable with.
Director Chester?
Thank you. Yes, I believe that if we're expecting different models for our staff and our students, we need to model that at the board level. So whatever the decision is, I think that's how we need to follow.
Anyone else? I think we're all kind of, so perhaps Dr. Battle, I know there are going to be some logistical planning that needs to happen for us to do that, but you and I can perhaps work together on what a hybrid meeting model might look like for the board, and just either it's 100% in person, it's remote, or it's a hybrid. And maybe I'm sure that Aaron probably will need to help too with the technical side of things, so we'll just add that to our to-do list.
Yes, absolutely, Chair Alt.
And then just a final comment, and I'll wrap us up. Back to school is going to look different this year. And I think in terms of knowing that we have 34 days before our classes, children, our students return to school, um, families and board members and staff all need to think about what do we need to do to prepare ourselves. If you have a young child in your home, it's been mentioned before, start working with them on the masks. Dr. Battle, I'm going to challenge you and your team to figure out what kind of training, what kind of education needs to happen for our families and our staff to make sure that we do our utmost best to try to make sure we've provided the information and made information available to families so that, if our statistics land within the hybrid model and we have families that need their children to go back to school, we've done the background work and our community has done the background work to make sure that we can do that safely. Knowing that there are other elements too as well, Dr. Babel, I know, it's not simply, are the students wearing masks, but what can be done with the welcome back week. And I know we touched on that too. We've got time and I think we should take advantage of that. Everybody just stay tuned. We need to get our community's input now and going forward. And so please, whether you're a staff member or a family member, when you see an opportunity to respond and share your opinion, we take those very seriously. We really value the input of our families and our community. And I would love to see response rates. I mean, Director Miller pointed out that we had really good response rates, both from staff and from families, and I wholeheartedly agree. At the same time, I would love to see us closer to 90% response rates, because that means that really our decision making is truly based on a fair representation of both staff and families, as well as our students. So stay tuned, stay engaged, please. With that, I will wrap this part of our meeting up and we will move on to the second agenda item, inviting Brian Gersich, Assistant Superintendent, and Rachel Gordon, Director of Technology, to share with us plans for online learning and the virtual academy. Welcome both.
Thank you again. Give Rachel just a second here to start the presentation, but while she's doing that, appreciate the way Chair Alt kind of closed that, because what I want to do is try to make sure that there is a clear line between these two presentations. The first one talked about a lot of things with a sense of urgency, things that are really happening and imminent. And hopefully what you're seeing here is the purpose for this virtual academy and this consideration is about also using that to say, let's keep our eyes forward as far as the long term. The presentation demonstrated we're going to have distant learning 2.0 regardless, based on the governor's order and expectation, and based on the fact that we're in a pandemic and it's the right thing to do. The process of talking about virtual academy is really to make sure that as we're going through this process, we're reviewing this educational model to say, does this have a place long-term for District 191? It's something that has been out there for a long period of time as far as online learning models. It's certainly something that our neighbors and competitors are considering as well. From the very start of this pandemic last March, I remember being in front of our group of leaders and talking about how, as much as this is tragic to be talking about pandemic and death, within these challenges sometimes present us with opportunities that we have to take a look at. And we knew going into a distant learning last spring like we did, we were going to be doing things technologically that we've never done before. And innovation was going to happen because we were forced into an area of innovation. And I'm really impressed with the work that our educators did. And there are a number of our special areas as well, where people who are content teachers, where people may have looked at them and said, I don't know how your content area is going to work in this virtual environment. And a lot of them who said, well, we'll just see about that, and did some amazing work within, being very creative with their content areas. So similar to how our teachers have found new and creative and innovative ways to learn about how they instruct, we've got to remember too that we have learners that are understanding and students that are understanding better about how they learn. And they may look at this, this distant learning model that they're going to experience differently this fall and say, this fits me. And as I said, it's been out there for a long time. And my own children have a very positive experience within their public comprehensive high school, but have selected online courses from time to time based on content, based on their interests, or based on when it fits into their schedule. This is an option that is out there. And as all of our students have an opportunity this fall to experience it, some of them may decide this fits me. And so what this really is about is, as we're going through this process, again, keeping that vision looking forward to say, should we continue to develop this and offer this as a part of our learning options for kids? I would just say, as I mentioned, our competitors are looking at this as well. Our neighbors are. And when you're talking about an online environment, your competitors or your neighbors are not just the people that border your district. An online environment can be done anywhere. You know, it's 15 plus years ago that Thomas Friedman started talking about the world being flat when it comes down to your competitors now, both for employment as well as, you know, market share. We're talking about that anybody who can be accredited in the state of Minnesota could be offering some of these things. So it is an exploratory. There is no ask. You'll see at the end that there's a timeline as to when, if there becomes an ask, when that would happen. But wanting to make sure that, yes, a lot of this relates to what distant learning is. The concept of virtual academy in this presentation is about, does distant learning become a part of standard operating procedures as one more option for the students in District 191 or students from other districts who look at 191 in our robust work with K-12 pathways and say, that fits me and I can take that from anywhere. And with that, I do want to invite certainly Rachel Gordon, who's done a tremendous job in her role as our Director of Technology and really is the one who is into the details of a lot of this plan.
Thank you. As Brian mentioned, today is really about tying in the immediate need to offer our 100% online school based on the governor's executive order, as well as looking forward at kind of what opportunities this leads us to. And I think that's one of the things we're so in the weeds with the details of right now that we also don't want to forget about some of the opportunities that this is really opening up. And we're seeing some needs from our families and our students and some excitement from our families and students for really challenging ourselves as how we deliver education into the future. So today we have a few slides really looking at that exploratory of what a virtual academy moving forward will look like. I will talk about kind of that dual, that immediate right now and what we're doing for the fall and into the 2021 school year, as well as what it looks like potentially or could look like for the 21-22. And so our goal really is to provide that online, high quality and flexible learning opportunity that offers and what we're calling the next generation, right, of K-12 learning. So we have brought a lot of really interesting pieces into our environment in the last few months. And what we're kind of couching this as is the 191 Virtual Academy. We really go back to our strategic plan. And when I highlighted kind of looking at these, I think the second bullet really speaks to me and how it relates to Virtual Academy is really serving the unique needs of our students, our families, and our communities first and foremost. And I think I'm going to talk a little bit about how we see some really interesting tie-ins with our pathways model and how we can really develop a unique program for the 191 Virtual Academy. So stage one is our immediate need to prepare for the 2021 school year and the option that many of our families are interested in, which is that 100% online school. We're going to do that and we're going to do the planning with the context of a long-term approach in mind, because there are some guidelines and frameworks that are well established for online schools that we feel will really leverage our immediate needs in a positive way. And then looking at that proposed beginning in 2021-22, a comprehensive and a supplemental 191 Virtual Academy K-12 that will provide student and family choice. And when I say comprehensive, that means 100%. The student would not need to come into our building. And supplemental means that they may take some of their classes in a face-to-face model here in our buildings, and then some of those classes would be completely online. So earlier, Amina shared the Distance Learning 2.0. And for our virtual academy this fall, we really are looking at that Distance Learning 2.0 as a base. We have a lot of background and experience that started in March in our emergency measures to get online, as well as some of the tweaks that we've had this summer and have had very positive feedback, particularly around the synchronous learning element and around kind of combining those tangible kits and hands-on activity with the synchronous learning. We know that in our Distance Learning 2.0 and our virtual academy moving forward is that we need to have solid supports for our advanced learners, for our English language learners, our special education students, our intervention. And we know that there are certain benchmarking assessments and standards, and all of that will be tied in together based on the guidance that we have from MDE for online schools. We also know that this is new. It's new for our families, it's new for our students and the opportunities and how we distinguish the pieces that we put in place for the 191 Virtual Academy and how they're unique and different and how they can support students and families in their unique needs. And we know that students will need to have access to their teachers in different ways. So as we move forward, part of the feedback that we got was the positive connection that students need to have. If you think about the traditional model where students might drop in before or after a class, or they might drop into a class to talk to a teacher before or after school, how do you mimic those things in an online school so that students have those same relationships with their teachers? So this is our opportunity to really dig down to, so Simon Sinek's, the circle, the why, right? Where you always start with the why of what you're doing. And for us, that really is, we have beautifully unique students across our district and we have beautifully unique families. And we wanna meet the needs that they have that are unique. We want to provide innovative learning opportunities for our students and our families. And we feel that there's a tie-in with our college and career pathways, which is something that is unique in 191 and we feel is a real advantage in our district. So for the 2021 school year, students do have the choice to attend 100% online. And we do have families from our parent survey that have indicated that they are interested in that option. And so we will be providing that immediately starting in the fall. Our online school is based, as I mentioned before, on the Distance 2.0 learning plan. And it will provide comparable learning opportunities. So we don't want students that are choosing our online school to feel that it is in any way a lesser experience. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for our families and our students to know that that is a world-class education. It's delivered in a very different way. The third piece is that the framework that we will be using is from MDE, and it is the iNACOL online school. There's a set of standards that really, these have been established for years. This is not a new set of framework of quality programs and things that we are working as we start to look at developing both for this year as well as for the long term. In the 21-22, we really have, for looking at that possibility, we've started reviewing the requirements, again, using those as a foundation for some of the work that we're doing this fall, and then also having that long-term approach. We will use our experience and stakeholder feedback, including our stakeholder feedback from our students and our families that are participating in our online school this fall. And there is an actual application that goes to MDE, which is a collaborative process both within stakeholders within our district, as well as a collaboration with MDE themselves. And so we work over the context of multiple months to build and refine, get stakeholder feedback, refine the process even more. So our application, when we do eventually apply to MDE, if we choose to do that, it has been an ongoing conversation. So if the board supports a 191 authorized online school provider, then this would be a draft timeline, is that in late November of this year, we would bring a draft to the school board, looking for potential approval in December. And then the MDE application would be delivered or would be submitted in January. Again, because that's a collaborative process, usually by the time you submit the application, you've ensured that you're meeting all the criteria of an online school. The 21-22 enrollment options then would include a virtual academy. So part of the timeline is based on the need for our students to register for the 21-22 timeline and making sure that it is in all the registration information. And it would be launched in 21-22 as that essentially a virtual academy 2.0. And at this point, I'll open, Brian, if there's anything that you want to fill in and clarify throughout the presentation.
Nope, you covered it. Just to reiterate the purpose of that timeline. It's backwards mapping from if we decided to move forward, making sure students know that this is an opportunity in the spring. And that's why you see those things coming before kind of in that sequence. And we did have a good conversation with MDE. They did say both a 90-day potential when you turn that around. The other thing that they also kind of indicated as well is they're getting a number of calls about this. So again, this is an exploratory that they're experiencing, which means while it is a collaborative process, we want to make sure that we're being conservative and expecting the full 90 days as a part of that process in the event that other districts like ours are backwards mapping from the same time. And just the other thing I would note is I just want to thank Rachel for her time, certainly digging into the details and making a lot of calls on this, as well as the collaboration that she's had with Amina Oftedal and Stephanie White throughout the summer on many projects, this just being one of those many as they work really together across those departments to create that synergy that we were looking for when we had to start working together.
Wonderful. This is really exciting. So board members, in terms of the approach and the general scope of this initial conversation, what comments or questions do you have? Director Miller, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. This is exciting, and I think one of one of the really great things about this is we're taking a situation was thrust upon us without a lot of anticipation at the end of the last year's school year, and have taken and looked at it and said, what can we do with this to extend and create more opportunity for the district? So I love that. I love hearing that storyline. The question I have is how what we're talking about and thinking about compares to what's out there elsewhere. As I was looking at this in advance of today, I've had conversations with a few folks with connections and students around the Twin Cities, and I kind of hear some things like, well, we've had that for a long time, or that's always been in place at our district, or someone threw out the idea of North Star, or a program called North Star. So I'm just curious if this is just basically, not basically, that's way understating. I know there's a lot of work going into this, but I'm curious if we're lining to kind of what some other districts are doing, or are we offering a differentiation that might be above and beyond? Is there more to this than what traditionally is offered as an online opportunity at other districts? Well, Rachel, take a swing at that, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we spent quite a bit of time talking with our MDE folks with, because we're not looking for just replicating what's out there. We want to create something that is uniquely 191. And so that is part of the planning process, is to really look at, what makes us different. MDE right now is seeing a lot of CTE emphasis in their online schools that are coming on board. And where we oftentimes see schools starting is in that supplemental area, where they're providing supplemental courses where students may take only 1 or 2 courses in that online environment. Sometimes you'll see that where students will take a health class or a phy-ed class in the over the summer because they want to open up their schedule for something throughout the year. We certainly have seen that in our district as well, is that because we have such great pathway options, is that students want to take those. And so part of it would be to ensure that our students can stay in our district and meet and have those needs met for a supplemental course here and there. And then part of it is really looking at what does, our partnerships and pathways really emphasize our certifications and our internships and our ability to reach out. And I think we have a unique opportunity there to develop our online school with that focus in mind, and really looking at expanding. A virtual academy is not the answer for every student, but it is the answer for some students. And a supplemental piece is a really nice layered approach for students to be able to open up the time, like, the path, the place, and the pace of their learning, so that they have opportunities. Maybe it's an internship that they're working on. Maybe it's a specific certification and they're doing some industry standard work. So it opens up opportunities for us. And I think that's the unique thing that we're kind of looking at for our 191 Virtual Academy.
And if I could just offer real quick too, oops, sorry, a little bit of a blip, just very briefly, as I look over the shoulder of my own kids and in this environment, and then I think about answering your question, I also think about, I want to make sure that we're capturing what makes 191 unique as well. And yes, Pathways is a part of that, but as I look over my kid's shoulder and what they're doing, what I don't see is the kind of equity lens that we use in our development of curriculum instruction as well. How can that also be a part of our planning as a part of our online environment that again, I'm not going to call out which model my kids are using, but I don't see that, and I would expect to see that in our model.
Good. Then a kind of a segue or follow-up question on that. Inevitably, everything comes down to a lot of things come down to the economics. So I'm curious, and as we follow this, so I encourage you to be prepared for that. But and my thing is saying my connection is unstable, so I'm not sure if are you guys hearing me all right? Okay. Just real quick, if a student, if we get somebody enrolling from Minneapolis or a different district, will dollars follow them? Is this potentially an opportunity to expand our student base outside the boundaries of our geographic location?
That's accurate. And that's a part of, as I talk about the comments of the world is flat, and the fact that our competitors are no longer just those who border us or who have access to us via vehicle. If students want to enroll with us in an online environment, if my own kids looked at the 191 and said they're offering an online class in computer science, I could think of a kid who would enroll in that class and potentially do that directly from where we reside. So absolutely, there does become that portion of it. If we can differentiate ourselves and what we offer that's unique, we can absolutely compete and draw in potentially students, as Rachel said, in a supplemental environment like my kids do, or in a full comprehensive environment once it gets to that point.
Thank you. Director Schatz.
Brian, the earth is not flat. So my question, Eric, stole a little bit of it, with the economic, question. That certainly is a piece, but I love this idea as a whole, not only because it opens up so many opportunities that we can offer for our students, for other students. And I love the idea of as a whole, certainly we face a lot of challenges with staffing, economics, things like that. And so there's the balance of the excitement of, what we can do and what we can offer with what we can really do and what we can really offer. And so I know that you're, that's a big consideration for you, but as, that's, as we've seen the last couple of years, our economics have been challenging, and so have our staffing needs and facilities and all that sort of thing. So I love this idea as a whole. I think it's a great plan, and I wholeheartedly endorse the idea that we have always had in the forefront of not only our students, what's best for our students and how we can make the best experience for them, but tagging along with that is what makes 191 unique, and the great job that we do making those extra experiences for our students. So thank you for that. Those are my pieces that I will be asking about the Virtual Academy coming up in the future.
Thank you. Other board members, any other comments? Director Hume.
Yes, I don't know that there is an answer for this, but one of the questions I've had around 100% virtual academy is how do we make sure that that opportunity is available for all of our students? I know obviously school is not a child care center, but there are many families who maybe would want to pursue a 100% online option and would not be able to because of their work situation or their child care situation. So is that something that we're factoring into these discussions around a virtual academy, both beyond this year and also for the current year? Beyond the children of emergency workers and kind of the essential workers.
Yeah, so it's interesting for this year is such a different kind of process than what next year would look like. And right now there's no specifics over how if a family wanted in 21, 22 to choose an online during the planning, if we choose to move forward with this model, we would look at the opportunities that we have
Sure.
both within our existing system and how we would support families with that.
Yeah, and like I said, I wasn't expecting an answer, but it's something to be aware of, I think.
Great question. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. I just had a couple of brief comments. I really appreciate that, of course, we're using an established framework to, to really make sure that what we're doing is on solid ground. And at the same time, that we want to be innovative and make sure that what we do is really representative of who we are as a district. I just think that's awesome. And I just think of, obviously pathways are one obvious distinguishing feature of our district. And, in terms of equity, I think about the renovation that, the rewriting of the English curriculum and those offerings that just are so very exciting and kind of expanded the content that into areas that students really are interested in and would find engaging. So one thing Rachel, you kind of alluded to it. Are you, in terms of partnerships in the community, I'm guessing you're going to be connecting with the Education Network and the Chamber on this in terms of figuring out, and other partners as well, in terms of what is it that we can do and include our business partners and our community partners in the conversation.
That certainly would be our hope as we move forward. Yes. Yep.
Great. Well, I think, Dr. Battle, do you have what you need from us to move forward?
Yes, I believe we have enough support to move forward with our planning for the authorization of online school approved by the state. Knowing that we are offering the virtual academy for our distance learning that's required by Governor Walz's executive order.
Great.
Yes. Staff, do you need anything else? I think we have what we need to move forward.
Awesome. Well, with that, thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Brian. Really appreciate, the work that you've already put into this amidst other projects and the work that you'll continue to do on this. And we will look forward to hearing back from you later this year. And with that, I will declare us adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.